Welcome to a very special extra episode of Scout Around, the show in which we talk about the pre-selections throughout the entire continent, throughout Europe, for the Eurovision Song Contest. This week, midweeks, we have seen the Netherlands and Israel pick their entries or present their entries, but of course it was also our very own Australia that presented Dami Im for Stockholm. Quite a surprising choice, in my opinion, but I will talk about it with my chief editor from ESC Daily, Steve van Gorkum. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Is it indeed a big surprise that SBS has come up with this name?
Well, a big surprise. She was mentioned. She was mentioned in certain rumors, in fan polls and stuff like that. But she wasn't the main candidate that we have been talking about for months, and that is probably because certain quotes from the SBS. We had an interview with Paul Clark last year saying they're going to go for an even bigger name than Guy Sebastian, and so the names that were mentioned were quite big. We've seen Kylie Minogue, Delta Goodrem, Sia, all these kinds of artists being mentioned. And in that sense, I think Dami was not the main favorite to become the Australian candidate.
Is it a bit of a disappointment, maybe, because you name these big names like Delta Goodrem? She was really big in the rumor circuit. Is it a bit of a disappointment, even?
I think I could understand if some people are disappointed. There's been a lot of big talk, not just in the rumors themselves, but also from the communication outlets, from SBS, from the EBU as well, even. When these names are mentioned, people starting to get certain expectations. Of course, the well-known Dami army will be very, very happy with this, but the mainstream Eurovision fan maybe hoped for a little bit more spectacular choice.
On the other hand, this could still be, of course, a successful choice because she has won a big talent show, the X Factor, in 2013. And we have seen these talent show winners or participants do very well in recent years at the contest.
Yes, they have a couple of things working in their favor. First of all, they have experience with juries, and although juries in talent shows have a more prominent role in the TV show than in Eurovision, but of course we do have juries in Eurovision, and they tend to like people coming from talent shows, especially if they sing well, and she's capable of that. So that's one thing. Another thing is she has experience with being in a competition. She has experience with being on a TV show instead of an arena, so she knows probably where the cameras are. Those are all important factors for Eurovision, and I expect, even though I'm not really that familiar with her work, I know a couple of songs, but I expect her to be very good in those areas as well.
So you talked about the big names that Paul Clark was mentioning about, perhaps like Delta Goodrem. What do you think is the main reason that she will not represent Australia this year?
I think there have definitely been talks with her. I think, to be honest, I think when Paul Clark said an even bigger name than Guy Sebastian, I don't think he was referring to Dami. I think that they were at that point really trying to get a bigger name, like, for example, Delta Goodrem. I think it was no coincidence that she wrote the Australian Junior Eurovision entry. But you have to keep in mind that SBS and Paul Clark, for example, are not the only ones who make the decisions for the Australians in Eurovision, because to participate in Eurovision for Australia is a very expensive endeavor. And so they have relied last year very heavily on the support of Sony Music. And of course, both Delta Goodrem and Dami are aligned with Sony Music, but perhaps it was the record label company who thought that it would be more beneficial for them to send an artist lesser known who might have a whole world or a whole continent in Europe to win than Delta Goodrem, who is already quite popular all around the globe. So maybe that could be one of the reasons why this decision was made. But yeah, I mean, for me personally, I would have loved to see someone like Delta Goodrem being on the Eurovision stage. But I'm still very curious about what the Australian song is going to be now.
Also because the way I look at it, the European Broadcasting Union has also read these big words from SBS Australia, and they came up with a very big name last year, Guy Sebastian. They gave Australia another chance to take part this year. Originally, that was not the case, of course. And now they don't come with such a big name as one might expect. And what does that say about the chances of Australia staying in the contest? Because I'm, to be honest, quite skeptical about that after they made this choice.
I still think Australia will be able to stay in Eurovision because it's not reliant just on this factor. Yes, you're right. I think the EBU was very excited about how seriously Australia approached the competition. The fact that Guy Sebastian came to Eurovision adds a whole new wave of professionalism, but also excitement. A name like that attracts viewing figures. I still think that the Australians are capable of sending quality to the competition, enthusiasm, a kind of novelty factor, even though, of course, that's less than last year when they were there for the first time. So I think there's plenty of reason, enthusiasm and stuff like that to still bring Australia back. But yeah, you're right. If they would have come up with a world star, that would have been a really good reason for the EBU to keep them in, and in this sense they are taking a risk. But again, like I said before, I think SBS might have wanted a bigger name, but there's all kinds of factors playing a role, and often it's not just who is your perfect act for Eurovision, but also other factors in, like I said, a record label company or an artist's personal agenda, and so I think SBS in this sense, even though they will never say it out loud, might be slightly disappointed themselves too. But you know, this is what they're going to have to deal with now, and they still could come up with a very good entry.
We will hear the Australian song in 1 week from now, Steve, next Friday. What kind of genre can we expect from Dami, do you think?
She's a pop singer. She's done gospel before she did the X Factor. I don't really think that will be what she's going to do for Eurovision. Either a very commercialized kind of ballad, power ballad, or into the dance genre actually, because that's the kind of stuff that she's done. This almost Nicki Minaj kind of music. This is what I would hope to see. And besides the song, I'd be also very curious to see if we can find out some hints already next week about how the show will look on stage for Stockholm.
So stay tuned to EC Daily. That's the main advice we can give, I guess, Steve, to follow the way this Australian song will be presented next week, next Friday.
Yes. We're ready for it.
Okay, this was an extra episode of Scout Around. Next Monday, we will go with the real deal, of course, when we talk about the pre-selections of the upcoming weekend. Thanks for listening for now, and until Monday.